My cousin, I'm sending you my aide-de-camp. General de Flore, who brings you the present letter. The Major General has given you my orders, but you will receive mine earlier because my officers are better mounted horses than you and ride faster than his. You will receive the movement orders of the day, but I want to write them to you in detail because it is of the greatest importance. I am sending Marshal Grouchy with the 3rd and 4th Infantry Corps towards Sombref, and I'm taking my guard to Fleurius, where I will also, before dawn, be before noon. I attack the enemy if I meet him, and I will scout the way to Gembloux. There, after what will have happened, I will make up my mind, maybe at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and maybe this evening. My intention is that you should be ready to move towards Brussels immediately after I have made up my mind. I will support you with the guard who will be at Fleurius or at Sombref, and I want to arrive in Brussels tomorrow morning. You will have to move this evening after I have made my decision, early enough to be able to inform you, so that you can move 3 to 4 miles this evening and be at Brussels tomorrow at 7 o'clock. You should be able to dispose of your troops in the following way. 1 division move to 2 miles in front of Quatre Bras, 6 divisions around Quatre Bras, and 1 division at Marbais. And in order to get closer to Sombref if I should need it there. This is the letter, by the way, that Napoleon has been sent to Ney. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Flight Past. My name is Simon, and we're going to be talking about the Battle of Ligny today. Hopefully you have been following along. And we got to the point yesterday where Napoleon had arrived here at Fleurius, and Wellington was on the other side at this spot here called Bry, and Napoleon had been brought up here because Grouchy's orders were that day to move to a place called Gembloux, which is along this road up here. But Grouchy had found that Zeiton's corps had actually dug in along this these series of villages here, as you can see down below. And Wellington, who had come across from Quatre Bras in the morning, who had found that the Dutch had and the Belgians had taken control of the crossroads there, decides to move across to talk to Blucher, and he meets him at the windmill at Bry, which is just here. So this letter that Napoleon is sending is basically it reflects Napoleon's thoughts on how today, the 16th of June 1815, will pan out. So yes, good morning there. So what we're going to do today, we're going to be looking at the actions of the Battle of Ligny. To be sure, we're going to look at the battlefield in more detail, and we'll start to actually put some troop movements into the discussion that we've been having. If you're new to the channel, we use the Huey here to get some unique shots of this area here, and you can see the blue lines are basically outline the area of what the operation area that defines the 16th of June 1815. So in the morning at of the 16th, Napoleon is basically down at Charleroi, and he envisages that the following kind of situation. Let me just jump out. It's probably easier just to give an overall view here. So if we head back this way, so on the 15th of June, the French have come across the border at Beaumont in 3 columns and have approached Charleroi, and they have quickly pushed through Charleroi. The Prussian corps of Ziethen didn't decide to defend this town. It's too far forward, and they fall back, the Prussians, along this road here, heading towards Fleurus and eventually Sombref. And what happens is that Napoleon decides that he'll divide his army here into two. He gives Ney the instruction to take the first two corps of Rail and de Erlon and move up on the left blue lines, you can see up there. And he gives the right side of his army, this is the corps of Lebau and Gerard, to Grouchy, and he is to push the Prussians back up this line here, and he thinks it's probably all the way to a place called Jean-Blot. So if we follow this road here, you'll see this old Roman roads, and he's expecting the Prussians to fall back to this position here at Jean-Blot. Which is a key crossroads, as you can see there. And so this is what this letter is about. He's basically saying to Ney what his intentions are, and what he has decided. If we move across to this side, he said to Ney that he wants him to push up this road from Charleroi to Brussels, and expects him, from the sounds of the letter, possibly that he's assuming that he's already captured this crossroads, but to put 6 divisions here at Quatre Bras, move 1 division up to this village here called Genappe, which is it's got a sort of steep river there, so that 1 division is there to try to stop Wellington moving down that road, and the other division he wanted to place in a village called Marbais, which is this one here. And so he will then, if you remember, so Napoleon is in control of his imperial army, imperial guard, and so he would decide then what he would do with that guard as regards to who he meets on the way. So what he says at the end of his letter is, depending on the circumstances, I will weaken the wings and strengthen my reserve. You understand well enough the importance of taking Brussels, and this could have given cause for some incidents, but because of depending on the movements of the English army, he intends to push on to try to cut off basically their supply lines to Ostend. And yeah, so that is the state of play in the morning. We left it in the last stream where Wellington had ridden down in the morning, and he's gotten to Quatre Bras, which was we're just coming up to now, and Wellington arrives here probably around about 10 o'clock in the morning, and he finds that the French are down in a place called Fresnes, which is just here on the left, and that they're basically having their breakfast, and there doesn't seem to be much activity going on. Now we move to then when Wellington sees that this happens, he takes the opportunity to ride across to Bry and visit Blucher. And there's a whole sequence of events and letters that have been sent, and after action reports about what was said and what wasn't said. But the whole gist of the of all these things was that the Prussians got given the basically wanted to know whether they should stand at Sombref. This is a place that Blucher had decided to concentrate, and Wellington, either through complacency or being given false information about his own troops' positions, believed that he was in a position to get about 20,000 troops along this road here from Quatre Bras towards Sombref to come to the aid of Blucher. Now Blucher had 4 corps in his army, and it transpired that he 3 of the corps could get to Sombref, and Boulou's corps, the 4th corps, couldn't get there. So because essentially because Wellington informs Blucher that he could get almost a corps strength of troops to him on the day, means that Blucher is more likely to decide to stand here at Sombref. And we'll look into why he's chosen this position in quite a lot of detail coming up. If Wellington hadn't said that he was prepared to come to Blucher's aid, it would have been probable that the Prussians would have pulled back to Gembloux and concentrated the whole of their army. But because Wellington has implied that he can get here, it means that Blucher is in a position then to concentrate his 3 corps that have arrived or will arrive on this day, the 16th. They've managed to, they will concentrate in the center of this battlefield and on the eastern side, leaving a space on the western side for the approach of Wellington. Now there's a whole historical argument about who said what to whom. It is I tend to sway on the side of, there's a guy called Muffling. He's a Prussian liaison officer, but he was on the Wellington's attached to Wellington's staff, and he says in his dispatches that Wellington did say he would come basically to Blucher if able, and implying that if Napoleon attacked him, then of course he wouldn't be able to. And you've got this sort of dynamic in the Prussian army. You've got this Prince Blucher. He's energetic old man, but an old hussar kind of guy. You know, basically quite an aggressive kind of leader. And compared to his chief of staff, Gnasna, who's a little bit more cautious. And so there's, I think Blucher and Wellington had probably a good relationship, and Gnasna didn't. And Gnasna himself was interesting because of his rank, the way he used to write orders to his corps leaders, depending on what rank he was talking to. And this is one of the reasons why Bulu's corps never got down. Lacked the urgency to get down here, because Gnasna's orders were a little bit please and thank you rather than orders. So right, let's talk then about the Battle of Ligny. Now Blucher would say to Wellington as he rode off back down the road from Bry, that he would fire a single cannon if he engaged in accepted battle here. What we'll do is we'll just bend back round and start talking about the battlefield of Ligny. Now, it's a very complicated battlefield. It's not really easy to see. And so we'll have to get out of the helicopter at some point so we can get a little bit more of an oversight of it. But let me describe you where we are right now. So this Vangnelli is essentially the right flank of the Prussians. So this is the sort of furthest extent that the Prussians will get to. They leave this section here for the Wellington's army when it arrives. And what we're going to do here is we'll essentially fly down the Prussian front line and point out some places for you. So there's Vangnelli here, and then there's a place, it's a little bit confusing, it's called La Amande, and what you essentially have is a place called La Amande La Haye, or let's call it La Haye, it's kind of here. And then Allemande is this sort of larger village just here. And this actually sticks out, is on the southern side of a brook, which we're going to fly down, which is the Ligny brook. So we got Allemande here, and we fly down this brook. It actually does a sort of a 90-degree turn. Comes from east to now we're now head north, and we're coming now to the village of Ligny, which is essentially this area where we are now, and the dot is. The brook then would move around to the right, and we head to a series of villages, which we can see down to the left, ending in this one over here called Tongrin. Now, essentially, I just swing around again. Essentially, it what the Prussians have decided to do is to defend a line of villages that is defined by the brook of the Ligny. It's not a very big brook, but it does have marshy areas, and which is below us now, and so it means it's difficult to cross, essentially. Now the buildings here are made of stone at the time, and so they are quite a defensive position, and because of all these little villages we see as we fly back, heading west now, is makes it a kind of a layered defense battlefield. We'll swing over around to behind the Prussian positions. We've got an important place. This is Bry. Down below us here is where the windmill is. And so this is where a lot of the Second Corps are positioned in this area here, acting as reserves to the Zeiton's First Corps. And we'll just swing now back into okay, we'll crash then. We'll swing now back towards Fleurus. Now Fleurus is essentially the center of the French position. And what you get with the French position is there's two corps, the ones of Van Damme and Gerard, and essentially because of the line of the brook, then the French positions are kind of done in a sort of zigzag way. Okay, so let's start talking, and let's jump out here, and we can start having a detailed look. So around about midday, Napoleon's come up. He's checking out the position. The French cavalry pickets and patrols have gone ahead, and essentially they've discovered that the Prussians have decided not to retreat today. Now Napoleon gets himself a scaffold built. Not quite sure where that was. They talk about a place called Tomb de Ligny. Could be somewhere around here. Anyway, he managed to have a look across to the battlefield. Essentially what you can see here, and he can see that there's the First Corps of Zeiton in this position here. He can't believe his luck, to be honest, because he didn't think he could engage with the Prussians so early on, and tried to complete his mission of defeating these people piecemeal. So in terms of let's just look at this battlefield from above, and we can start off on the this left side. So we're looking at the left side of the battlefield, and what we essentially have, that town on the left is called Van Naily. This is essentially the furthest right flank of the Prussians. So what we're looking at here is essentially the place where the First Corps of the Prussian army occupy. So some of the places that we're going to need to remember is obviously this is the village here of Van Nelly here, and it gets confusing because there is essentially a large village here, this is called Saint Amand. So we'll call this. They're all, the names get mixed up. So if you just remember, this is Saint Amand here. There's also a farmhouse called the Hameau de Saint Amand, which is essentially, I believe, one of these positions here. I think it might be this one. And then we have a place called La Haye. It's Saint Amand again, but it's called La Haye, and it's essentially where the brook kind of bends. I think it is. Let's zoom out a little bit. It's kind of this place here. I think it's kind of this place in the middle. So essentially, if you remember that the Vangeli is on the left, there's a sort of Saint Amand farmhouse in the middle with La Haye behind it, and a place called Saint Amand here on the right. You can essentially see that side of the battlefield, and how you can also see how interesting it is in that they're basically using a whole sequence of villages and hamlets and farmhouses as a sort of a cover. And essentially this corps comes all the way around this way and follows the brook down to Ligny itself. I think there may have been some adaptation here, but I think it's kind of here. And there should be a chateau in here somewhere that will be significant. And behind, significant places behind the position is the Bry, its windmill here, and behind here would be where the second corps of Perch's corps would be. Perch. There's two Perches in this battle. The first Perch is called Perch 1 because he's more senior. So Perch 1 is essentially here, behind as a sort of a reserve. And then if we then pan to the left, we get Sombref itself is here. And we then get into a sequence of villages again. Places called Tongrenelli, Tongrin, Boigny, and Balatre. And they kind of sort of follow along I'm too far this way, sorry. Yeah, Sombref is here. So essentially the line then comes around. This is the road to Fleurius. It's sort of this sort of direction. Follows the brook. So it weaves around this area here. This is a sort of the Tongrin area, and this village here is Boigny, and then it will come out here, which is a place called Balatre. So you can see that how that stream there will define the front line of the Prussians. Now, as you can see here, this this where the straight road is here is actually a pretty cool feature, because when the French actually line up, they have Gerard's corps will essentially line up here facing west towards Ligny, and Van Damme, he is over this side, and he will line up in front of Saint-Amand. So he will be kind of here, lined up this way. So the French are actually lined up perpendicular. The two corps of Gerard and Van Damme are perpendicular to each other. And then on the far side, we've got a division of Gerard and some cavalry of Domon over here, and they will be on the left flank. And on Gerard's right, so to the north. So remember, Gerard is kind of lined up along this road facing west, and down here, essentially, we have Hulot. Now, he was the guy who took over from Beaumont, who was the guy who deserted on the 15th. So he has his troops here facing north, and then Exelmans and Payol have a number of cavalry elements over in this on this side of the battlefield here. And of course, Napoleon is back at Fleurus, so he's got he's brought the Imperial Guard up. The Imperial Guard are positioned to the west of Fleurus in this area here, with their artillery behind, the Guard artillery, and Milhard has cavalry. They're essentially the sort of in this area here, which fills the gap between Gerard and Van Damme. That is the basic setup for the Battle of Ligny. And on that note, then I think I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we will then look at some of the numbers involved, and we'll start putting some actual movement into the battle itself. So stick with me, and we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Flight Pass. My name's Simon, and today we are continuing our story of the Battle of Ligny. In the last part, we just did a brief look at the battlefield. We are now at Fleurius, looking north, and let's talk about some of the what happens. Let's let's have a look at the actual core. So we this here is essentially we are looking at the front line of the Prussians here. So where my helicopter is at the moment is kind of just before the front line. That is the village of Saint Amand, and in front of it is the corps of Van Damme. So you have to imagine there's 19,000 troops essentially here facing this way. We can then and there's elements, you know, these are a core, so there's cavalry and some artillery involved as well on his left, but essentially where this is the far left of the battlefield. He's got Domon's 3rd Cavalry Division over here, and the Girard as well. Girard is probably in about this area. He's actually part of Rail's 2nd Corps, but he's attached to Van Damme. We have Gerard then. So Gerard is in charge of the 4th Corps, and essentially he's in this area here. So what we're looking at here is Ligny, the village of Ligny, and Gerard is kind of in this sort of area here. On the heights, there's slight heights. You can see it's a sort of a slight rise, but he's actually deployed his troops in this sort of fashion here. So he's perpendicular to Van Damme. Gerard's 4th Corps got about 15,500 troops. And with all the sort of associated cavalry and artillery. And then back here at Fleurius on the right-hand side is Milhaud's 4th. The 4th Cavalry Division, and that is essentially here. Now, when we get down to this section here, with the front line of the Prussians essentially follows this brook. If I can kind of weaves its way around. I think it turns, it kind of bends around here and then back up this way, and then it takes a left. So here essentially is where you get the Hulot's 14th Infantry Division, and Hulot is the guy, he took over from Beaumont. He's the guy who deserted Hulon steps up and takes command. So he's here. He's facing essentially north, and he's got the village ahead of him here. You can see is Tong Green, and this one here on the right hand side is a village called Boigné, which is on this side of the brook. And then we have the cavalry divisions, essentially of Pajul's 1st Cavalry Corps and Exelman's divisions. And they are essentially on this land here on the right hand side. And extend, there should be another brook, probably down here. I think it's here. This is kind of represents the sort of the right-hand flank of the French. So you get a sense of the scale of the battlefield then. So the evening before the battle, Zeitung was occupying a place called the Tomb de Ligny, but he felt very exposed. So I'm assuming it's somewhere up here in this area. He gets orders to retreat back from this position into these into the front line here, essentially the front line. So if I zoom out, we should see. Okay, this is essentially here. The position that Zeitung pulls back to, and he sets up his positions at around about 8 o'clock in the morning. He's kind of he occupies Ligny, and so we're talking about actually sort of this sort of zone here is where Zeitung's 1st Corps is set up. His 1st Corps is divided into about 4 brigades, and then he's got some cavalry as well. So the 4 brigades, remember the 1st brigade was Steinheitz, and if I can remember, yeah, so Steinheitz, he was the guy, if you remember, was operating the spoiling retreat back from Thuin and Lobs on the 15th. When he gets here, he's put in charge of essentially this left-hand side, center left-hand side, Saint Armand in this sort of zone. So he's with the 1st Brigade. We have the 2nd Brigade is commanded by Perch 2, so he's a brigade commander, not the corps commander, and he's essentially in the center here, around the village of the sort of hamlet of La Haye. We got the 3rd Brigade is controlled by a guy called Jago, and he's essentially on the left-hand side in this sort of area here. And he's also controlling the north part of, the south part of Ligny itself. And the 4th Brigade is Donsmark, and I believe he's to the right-hand side over here. Yeah, so just go through that again then. So Steinmark's 1st Brigade is essentially formed up in this area here, behind the village of Saint-Amand. It's got 8 companies of Fusiliers, and so they're occupying here. He's got I think he's left some Fusiliers at Bry as well, and in between there are some Silesian Schützens, and he holds 1 battalion of Westphalian militia just behind this village of Bry. So Perch 2 then is essentially along this road in this area. Also, Donnersmarck, by the way, sorry, is actually inside the village of Ligny. There's a crossroads back here. This place here. I think it's one of these two. It might be this one. And this is called Les Trois Berettes. And this is where Zieten has placed some Roder's 1st Cavalry Corps is here, with some Silesian Hussars, and they're on this western flank, basically to protect and keep open this route here, which is the anticipated route that Wellington will take on. Now for Zieten, his position is okay. He's in position, but he's a little bit concerned because he has the whole or a very large part of the French army in front of him, and the French have begun to probe his positions from about 11 o'clock in the morning, and he has this worrying wait until the rest of the Prussian army arrive. And they do arrive. Perch's 2nd Corps will. They've been bivouacked at a place called Mazy, which I believe is. 'Cause, 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 somewhere in this direction. I believe it's this area here. They've basically got up in the morning and carried on marching towards the battlefield. They marched past Blucher, who's now got to Sombref. And they essentially have around about 32,000 troops. And Blucher sends this corps into this area here. Essentially on this, I believe it's in this, yeah, it's essentially in this area here. This will be the place where he puts the second corps. So first corps in front and holding all these little positions, and he's holding the second corps behind here. And the next corps to arrive was Thielmann's third corps, and essentially they begin to arrive at around about midday, and they're deployed on the left-hand side. In this sort of area here. And he's got around about 24,000 troops. And they're essentially, their job is to ensure the safety of the road back to Namur. They essentially want to protect their supply route. And this is the town of Namur. This was one of Blucher's original headquarter positions, so they're protecting this this route. And that's where they are placed on this side here in this area. So you can see that the dispositions of the Prussians tend to be this sort of central area here, and to the left, and then this area to the south of Marbais, which is essentially here. This whole sort of chunk of land here is essentially not protected, because the Prussians are expecting Wellington to come down this road here and to fill in this space here. You can also see how when Napoleon was talking about Marbais, this sort of area he's talking about, so they're seeing it as a sort of a link-up position. So it's obviously an important position for both the armies, And remember, Ney is essentially here, and his Napoleon was definitely thinking, okay, Ney gets to here, and then Ney then comes down this road. Then essentially you're ensuring that the Prussians will be driven to the east, away from Wellington's army. And that is all down to what the Prussians believe that Wellington has promised them. Their belief was based on Wellington's Frasnez letter, his rival of his staff. Wellington comes through here probably around about midday on his way to see Blucher, and he gets cheered as he passes this place called Les Autres Burettes, which I believe is one of these junctions here, possibly this one. And because the Prussians basically believe that his presence on the battlefield it signifies that they will be coming to help. They meet Blucher and Wellington will meet at the windmill. Now I believe it's kind of here, and I'm trying to get a sort of a view that would be likely. Maybe it's a little bit too high, so it's a little bit difficult with this thing to get a good yeah. This is the sort of essentially the view that they would have had at that time. There's some controversy about what was said in later writings. I think there was a political element going on. The Prussians were possibly trying to discredit Wellington, blaming him possibly for their defeat here. Spoiler alert. Wellington's basic criticism of this, or what he said later was his basic criticism of this battlefield, was that these slopes that you see here, where when Wellington got here there were troops probably lined up here, meant that they were targets for the guns of Napoleon, and they were too exposed. So we've got Wellington obviously had experience with the French in the peninsula. Whether this is true or not, we don't know, because essentially any troops in these fields, likely it was probably rye growing. This rye back in the 1815 used to grow higher than a man's head. There's a lot of stories of troops maneuvering through these fields and being surprised by the enemy because of just the height of the crop. So yeah, so I don't know. At the end of the day, essentially, if you look around though, where else would you have a battle? Presumably they've targeted certain places, or they feel certain places look good for a battle. It's usually based on roads and how easy it is to get there, and so they obviously felt they're comfortable with this one, and Blucher probably thought that with Zieten already based in this area, that it was probably better to fight here than anywhere else. And I think we'll see the sort of the grounds, and it's essentially, I think it's as good as any place really. A lot of there's some very subtle features of this battlefield. For example, there's this hill in the middle here. It does give dead ground. There's a lot of buildings, of course. Not all of these are contemporary, but that provides dead ground to artillery. The buildings are made of stone, so we'll see that they are resistant to being caught on fire by incendiary weapons. I don't think what Wellington says he said at the time. Let's put it that way. The meeting that he has with Blucher lasts around about an hour here, and essentially the Prussians are under essentially they believe that Wellington is going to come to their support, so they will hold out as long as possible until he does. If though Wellington didn't give his consent, then it would have been easier then for Blucher to retire up these Roman roads, essentially to somewhere like Jean-Bleu, and meet up with Blucher's army. Sorry, Bülow's corps, and have the battle essentially somewhere maybe around here. Or it could be by that time as well. We're talking 12 o'clock. The battle actually starts at around about 2:30, so it's not too far away from an attack. But maybe they felt it was too late to pull back. But essentially the troops had already dug in at this position here. The French were on their toes. Pulling back would probably be an even more a bigger disaster if they just stood. The other argument that Wellington possibly either lied or didn't know about, or presumed he did have enough troops, whatever the reason is maybe Wellington felt that if Blucher doesn't stand here, essentially what happens is the Prussians will pull back. This would enable Napoleon to do this pinning tactic of his. He'll probably send Grouchy and his cavalry heavy units to harass the Prussians on pushing them back towards Gembloux, whilst he would then move his Imperial Guard and essentially probably maybe even the corps of Van Damme, essentially move him across to Ney and then take on Wellington's army. And maybe Wellington thought, well, I haven't got the space to get my troops concentrated enough, and it would be better to let Blucher's Prussians take a bloody nose than us. And we don't know. Right, on that note then, I think I'll take a break, and we'll be back in a few minutes. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the battlefield of Ligny. And we're in the Huey here. And we're just starting the battle. We've just been talking about the positions and of the Prussians and the French. And we're now going to have a look at what essentially was Napoleon's plan. He believed, by the way, that this battle would be quick. He felt it would be over in about 3 hours. So we're coming around, just flying to the west of Fleurius. This is, we're going to just spin around and head north, and we'll come to a hover. So, just here is the town of Fleurus. Now if we just we could just pause here, jump out. So essentially, this is the view that Napoleon had, and he has a plan. And his plan all along has been to make sure that the Prussians are pushed back away from Wellington. So his plan has always been, he has this sort of very cool way of using his forces. And we spoke about he had a cavalry force over here. This cavalry force is essentially here to pin the third corps of Thieleman's Prussians here on this right-hand side. So Napoleon is very light in terms of infantry on this side, and his attack is essentially going to take an advantage of his numbers on the center and the left. So remember, this here is where Van Damme's corps is, facing this way, and then we have essentially facing Ligny this way, the corps of Gerard. And basically they're going to assault the Prussian centre and the right, and hoping that Ney would secure the crossroads at Quatre Bras, and then that will enable him to approach the left flank as well. So there's a lot of pressure he's hoping to apply to the right flank, essentially, of the right and centre of the Prussian line, which is here. This is essentially where the Prussians are. He likes to put pressure on these areas and weaken certain areas, and he holds back the Guard, which is essentially in this area to the west, where this sort of quarry area is here. The Guard is sat here, and essentially they will wait for a weakness somewhere in this area, provided by one of the two corps in front of them, and then the Guard will advance through that weakness and hopefully rout the enemy. He says at the time, in 3 hours' time, the campaign will be decided, and if Ney carries out his orders thoroughly, not a gun of the Prussian army will get away. And so, yeah, his main ambition here is to push the Prussians back on their supply lines, back on the this road here out to Namur. Would be great if he could get them to go this way back to Namur here. Then he's essentially driven a wedge between the Allied armies, and he can then turn his attentions back to onto Wellington's army itself. Cool. Let's do a bit more flying. So you got to remember as well, a lot of these things that Napoleon says, and also what Wellington says, and to some extent Blucher, is also written as part of their memories. And so you can sometimes read into this thing saying, words like, "Oh, if Ney does his job, we will have a complete victory." It's almost like they've already sort of aligned Ney up as the sort of scapegoat. Okay, let's since we just mentioned Ney, let's find out what he's doing. So the battle is about to be launched here at 2:30 in the afternoon, and the signal for battle being accepted was going to be 3 cannons. So this is a quote here from Ropes on the campaign of Waterloo, and he says that the whole management of Marshal Ney on this day shows distrust of the Emperor's judgment, unwillingness to take the most obvious steps, finally disobedience of orders. So I think that might be a bit harsh. But what we find is that Ney is a little bit hesitant. Let's put it that way. Ney, I think Napoleon finds out that Ney isn't pressing forwards with urgency, and there's the Emperor, about to leave Charleroi, wrote sharply to Ney, whose indecision was being made manifest, commanding him to unite the corps of Ryle and Dale Erlon with the corps of Kellerman, adding that with these forces you should defeat and destroy any enemies in your front. He describes that Blucher was yesterday at Namur. It is improbable that he could have troops near Quatre Bras, so you have to deal with only with those on the way from Brussels. So he's basically saying there's not going to be any Prussian troops in front of you. They're all gone to Sombref. You'll just find that there's whatever Wellington is going to send to you. So get on with it. Now, before the battles have even begun, there's been two errors that have occurred, and these will come up and essentially threaten the whole victory. The first one was that The Lobile's 6th Corps had been left in Charleroi or near Charleroi, and they had essentially been left with no orders. And the second one was that no one had actually told Ney that his job on the day would be to come to Napoleon at Sombref and aid him there. There's mention in his letter that Napoleon sent in the morning to him to say, oh, you know, put your 6 divisions on Quatre Bras, put 1 division at Genappe and 1 division at Marbais. Now, Marbais is in between the battlefields, but there is no explicit mention of Ney doing anything more than that. If anything, it was basically Napoleon saying, I will act on what's happening in front of me, not you. Tactically as well, let's with Ligny, the way that Napoleon attacks, he attacks the centre and the left, and he does it all at the same time. He doesn't give Blucher an opportunity to redeploy his frontline forces. By engaging along essentially this line. Let's just pause here. Essentially by having Van Damme and Girard's forces all attacking the centre and the left at the same time means that Blucher isn't capable of pulling someone out and moving it across, jiggling his front line, and it essentially means that it is forcing Blucher to commit his reserves into the front line instead. And the consequence of that is that for the reserves to be in a position to get to one of these positions, I'll say one that is like Ligny or something like that, one that is under threat, means that the reserves need to be relatively near, and that then exposes them to artillery fire. And remember, this is the infantry are lined up here, and because I think Napoleon doesn't believe Blucher is going to be doing an aggressive movement. For example, Girard has his troops here. He'll have his artillery actually lined up in front of his infantry, about less than 800 yards away, because essentially he knows that they're not going to come out and try and grab the guns. So the western end of the battlefield, this is this end up here, was particularly fraught. In the fighting that's to come. Lots of hand-to-hand combat occurs in these villages. The French try to set fire to the buildings, but a lot of them are stone, so it doesn't work. And essentially there's a number of waves of attacks and counter-attacks go on all for the rest of the day. And we're talking probably 5 or 6 waves of attacks occur in this area here on the western side of the Prussian line. And Napoleon is seeking to advance his guard, getting a bit impatient. And he's believed, again, I'm not sure if this is true or not, that he's sent a message to Ney in the late afternoon to say the fate of France is in your hands. Do not hesitate even for a moment to direct your advance on the heights of Saint Amand. And so when he says that, he's talking about these heights here. Now, Ney doesn't receive this message until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And essentially, with the distance being probably 5 miles back over here. You know, we're talking this, and remember, Ney is in the middle of a battle himself here. So to get back to these heights from 5 o'clock would be difficult. And so Napoleon basically can't wait for him anymore. And 5:30 he prepares to launch an attack of the guard. And he's just about to launch his attack of the guard. So the guard, remember, are here. We can assume that Napoleon is somewhere in this area. Some high ground position, probably maybe here. And he's basically looks across to the left, just as he's about to launch his attack, and he sees a column on his left flank. And scouts have come to him and reported that this column is hostile. And so Napoleon is like, okay, well, I can't send my guard in until I see what this is. And he's forced to postpone his attack until he could verify who it was. And in fact, this column, which was coming across from this direction here, was the Erlon. And because of another mess up with the staff, he was essentially ordered to advance to a place called Wagney. Now, might have to get the other map out here. So remember, this is this place is called Wagnele. Let me just get the other map out. We'll look for we'll zoom in on the area. It's difficult to see where this is, what they're talking about. Let me have a look on our Google map. Doesn't appear to be a place called Wagner. I can see they always keep changing these names. So essentially, I believe that what we're looking at is if Napoleon is at Fleurus, maybe in between Saint-Amand and Fleurus, he wants de Erlon to come via say Les Bonvillers to Wagner. What's actually happening is that they're coming essentially down this road here on his flank, possibly in this from this area here. Now, if that's the case, then he has to stop, because if that's Wellington coming, then he will have to wait. And this is another example of the poor staff work that the French army is experiencing. The orders are not being written clearly. The chief of staff is Soule. There's mix-ups in messengers. There's mix-up. There's not clear instructions, and it's something that the French army will suffer from a lot because Berthier, his faithful Berthier, chief of staff, is no longer with him. And the other thing as well is that what we're talking about here is essentially de Erlon is approaching kind of from this way here, and de Erlon's made a mistake because what he should have done is, as he's approaching from this direction here, he should have sent a messenger ahead. Could have easily ridden a messenger up to Napoleon's position, let's assume here somewhere, just to say it's me over there, you know, but he doesn't. So that's another mix-up. There's reports at the time as well that the Van Damme's corps, which was here, they're getting nervous. So essentially, I think what we're talking about is the de Erlon is coming. He's been ordered over to Napoleon's side, and his approach from this angle here has essentially spooked the French left flank. And what that basically means is that Napoleon had an opportunity to send in the guard. As I say, it was probably around about 5 o'clock, and this is delayed until 6:30. And this allows, the hour has allowed the Prussians to reorganize their line, and then the opportunity is kind of lost. In that confusion as well, this is the time when this village here, Saint Amand, is recaptured by the Prussians. So there's a backwards and forwards going on. So Erlon began the day essentially on the road here, just coming out of Charleroi in this sort of region here. He had Duret's 4th Division as his vanguard, followed by Donzelot and the 3rd Division of Marconnet, with a guy called Quillot. He was had the 1st Division, who formed the rear guard. So the description I've got here is that at around 5 o'clock, the corps turned right at an inn called the Cabaret de l'Empereur, which is approximately 2 miles north of the Roman road that crosses the Brussels road. Okay, so the vanguard passed to the south of Bois Dulet and the north of the village of Villers-Perrin, which is essentially, I think this here is the village of Villers-Perrin. So we're talking that they came up this road towards Frasnes, and then they cut across country essentially in this direction here. Possibly because they were supposed to be going to Vangelet, but they didn't. They used this road here. Anyway, they're in this section here, basically, when they're spotted and essentially spook the left flank of the French. Yeah, so basically there's a lot of divisions of d'Erlon's corps here, moving up this road and then heading this way. And what we essentially get is the forward divisions pop out of a wood. Was what they called on the heights north of this village. So essentially they sort of come out here, yeah, in this sort of direction here, and because they've popped out here, this has spooked the left flank of the French. We'll talk about this d'Erlon's movements probably in more detail, but essentially he is ordered across towards. He was going to be Ney's backup at Quatre Bras, so Ney was reliant on him, and so he was essentially to move up here to the battlefield at Quatre Bras here. But he gets orders to move towards Napoleon. So who are you going to obey? He essentially gets marches across to this area here, manages to spook most of the left flank of the French over there, delays Napoleon's attack in the Imperial Guard at 5:30. Ney throws a wobbly when he realizes that D'Erlon isn't coming towards him, and orders him to return back. And essentially what happens is that D'Erlon doesn't take part in any of the battles. Now, D'Erlon has been given as another set of woolly instructions as well. Something about there's a report that he was to do his that's it. It wasn't just D'Erlon who gave his 4th Division commander General Duret. He was basically told to come up here and do what was he thought best, which seems a bit woolly. It was something like he had no specific instructions, but just to be careful. And Duret sort of took these instructions as he felt that he, in a sense, he needed to protect the gap in between the two armies, feeling that they could come through, the Prussians could come through. Right, okay, let's take a break there, and when I come back, we'll I think what we'll do is we'll start to actually look at the ins and outs of the battle properly of Ligny, and then we'll do Quatre Bras later on. I'll take a break now. I'll see you in a moment. Hello everybody, welcome back to Flight Pass. My name's Simon. We're looking today at the Battle of Ligny, and we use Flight Simulator and it's satellite technology to get down and get dirty with the positions, so we can see how the terrain affects the history. We time-wise, it's around about 2:30, and on the 16th of June 1815, and we are now going to be standing here where we believe this was probably the position that Napoleon took up. You can see essentially in the distance the left the right flank of the Prussians, and you can see the sort of positions all the way across here to there is basically the Prussian positions in front of him. On his right, facing west, he's got the corps of Gerard, and on his left here he's got the corps of Van Damme facing north. He hopes obviously to push the Prussians to the east. Now he writes now to Ney, and remember, sorry, he instructs Soult to write to Ney, and Ney is over here in the distance at Quatre, probably about 5 miles away, and he Soult informs Ney that the Emperor is attacking the Prussians between Sombref and Bray, and so we can see Bray there on the distance and Sombref, and he and the time is 2:30, and he says, I quote, "His Majesty's intention is that you will also attack whatever force is in front of you, and having vigorously pushed it back, will turn in our direction so as to bring about the envelopment of the enemy's troops I have just mentioned to you." Napoleon's got a high regard for a decisive victory. And he says it's possible that within 3 hours from now, the fate of the war may be decided, and if Ney executes his orders properly, not a single gun of his army will escape him. So it's we're not sure exactly if Napoleon has given Ney a giddy up. He's not sure if he does control Quatre Bras or not, but he's going to go ahead here with the battle. Now the Battle of Battle of Ligny begins at around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and many of the French troops were actually still coming up the road behind us here. We're talking, they were still streaming across the Sambre, and we're talking in basic numbers that the French had about 76,000 men, and the Prussians around about 83,000 at the time. Now, of course, we've discussed this battlefield, the topography of it and the positions of it. So the Prussians have had the advantage of choosing the position, and we've discussed some of the advantages and disadvantages of it. One of them being that Wellington thought, probably after the event, that the slopes behind were a little bit exposed, but there's a lot of good defensive characteristics of this battlefield. And remember, I think you got to it's not essentially a battlefield where the Prussians, I think, would would believe that they would win, but they definitely would think that they could hold. And that's what they needed to do. They needed to hold and delay. Now they're both expecting troops to be coming from the left to support and win the game. So these two battlefields are essentially linked. Okay, so let's start then the battle. We've got 3 o'clock in the afternoon then, 3 cannon are fired, and what we're going to describe here, it's a pretty much an intense battle. There's not much tactical finesse going on. And the whole battle is going to be all about the control of these villages, hamlets, this village of Ligny, and the way that and the cavalry of the French pinning the Third Corps back. Now, so as I say, the guard fire their 3 shots, and Van Damme, who has his corps essentially here, he doesn't even bother with cannonading. He just sends Le Fol's division to assault this village of Saint-Armand, which is this one here. Essentially looks like it's got a village high street, church in the middle. So Le Fol's division is split into 3 essentially columns, and with a cloud of skirmishers preceding it, and they're accompanied by the band of the 23rd Regiment, playing La Victoire en chantant. And remember, this field, the crops of the time aren't these sort of special hybrid stuff we get these days. This stuff was over head height, and so a lot of the columns are struggling with this corn, and they begin to be raked by Prussian fire, artillery fire, and they take quite a lot of losses heading in, but they continue their attack and essentially take this village within about 15 minutes. Now remember, this is actually an advanced position on the Prussian line. You can actually see the brook is behind it, so it's on the other side of this little brook, which has marshy areas. And essentially then the Prussian guns, which are up here on the heights above, start firing into the village. And essentially, then all along this line, then the attacks start going in on these villages here. At 3:15, just to give you a bit of context, there's a message came from Lobai and his corps, the 6th Corps, in Charleroi. Essentially says that saying that Ney has been confronted with 20,000 troops at Quatre Bras, and his 10,000 troops have got no orders. Now, essentially, what this means is Napoleon seems to be relying on Ney's troops to come to his support when there is a corps behind him, essentially, that hasn't been given any orders. And those 10,000 troops could have made an impact on the battlefield. They could have got from Charleroi to Fleurus probably by early afternoon, late or even in the mid-afternoon, and helped turn the tide. But essentially, that muck up, when we're talking like coming from Charleroi here, where the blue line is, to Fleurus, means that by 7:30, the corps of Lobai is not essentially hasn't arrived. Napoleon believes at this point that essentially Rile's corps with Ney should be sufficient to hold Wellington at Quatre Bras, and he sends an aide-de-camp with a penciled note to D'Erlon, and who was on his way to Ney to divert him. And the note also meant that the guy delivering it would deliver the message to D'Erlon first, and then take the message then up to Ney to inform him that essentially he wasn't going to get his reserves. Now, General Fuller believes that the leaving of the Lombard at Charleroi was an inexcusable blunder, and this could be one of the reasons why post Waterloo so much emphasis is put on what Ney's actions were at Quatre Bras, rather than what essentially possibly could have been a blunder by Napoleon and his staff with Lombard. Right, so 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we're in this area here still. We've got Vangelay here on the left, Saint-Armand, La Haye in the middle, and Saint-Armand here, the village. And the fighting is hand-to-hand, close quarters, restricted in these sort of narrow sort of villages. And Blucher is essentially forced to move his reserves into the line to fix it. On the other side, Tongrenel, which is essentially I believe around here somewhere. This forced the French at 5:30. Let me just grab my map again. It's in this area here. That falls to the French. We get contested. Gerard's is moving into down the slope towards Ligny, which is so he's he's got his artillery here, firing down and trying to get across this into Ligny itself. So when we get to 6 o'clock, this is when Napoleon decides to order up his guard, and that's when we get d'Erlon appears on his left flank. Essentially, Van Damme is in this position, still continuing his fight here. He gallops, essentially says that there's Van Damme passes a message up to Napoleon saying that a strong enemy column was within 3 miles marching on Fleurus and threatening their left flank. So he's essentially in this position here, and we assume that d'Erlon has appeared essentially here. Van Damme has taken this to be an enemy column. Sorry, I'll remove that map. So yeah, this is we'll run through that again. Van Damme is here and essentially sees enemy troops coming out here, and it's probably in this area somewhere here that d'Erlon has approached the battlefield, and Van Damme takes this to be the British. Now, both Ney and d'Erlon had been ordered to approach the battlefield by Saint-Amand, which essentially I believe means from this direction. But it just causes a bit of confusion at a moment when Napoleon wanted to take advantage of the Prussians' weakening. I think he knew that it was probably d'Erlon, but he had to wait just to make sure. And of course, what was essentially happening was that d'Erlon was coming in a little bit too far south than Napoleon intended. So the essential what happens here basically is that Van Damme has been forced then to come a retreat back from this place called La Haye to protect his rear. And there's panic is spread. Lefold's division flees. There's meant to be panic stricken, and news of a column coming in from their left. It even forces Lefold to turn his own. Because remember, Lefold was initially here. He had artillery, and he essentially threatens his own men with his artillery to encourage them to return to their positions. In all this confusion, Blucher manages to retake Saint-Amand. And of course, then we then get the probably the worst thing for de Erlon to do is he essentially gets like a piggy in the middle. He gets orders to return to Ney, so he turns. Even he shows his face here, makes all this confusion on this side, and then is ordered back by Ney to Quatre Bras. Around about 7 o'clock, then we get the Guard, the Imperial Guard. They move forward and they begin their attack on Ligny. So I believe they would have come down this way, and they start their attack onto Ligny here. Saint Armand, which is just here to the left, is retaken. Laval and Vezin have managed to rally their troops and push them back in again. And Gerard's division, which was on the left of Van Damme, managed to take the Le Hameau. They retake, which is essentially here. They retake this position for the third time that day. So the Prussians are fighting vigorously. They've had a to and fro battle most of the day, but they're now beginning to essentially run out of reserves. And essentially at this point, when the Guard has come in and these villages are taken again for the essentially the third time, without the reserves, Blucher realizes that he's probably finished. And he's very good at rallying his troops, but there's only a certain amount of time that times he can do that. And say we've got the Guard essentially now attacking into Ligny. So this is the sort of center of the Prussian position. So he's literally just battering ram going in. And we're talking here probably about 7:30 in the evening. This reports of the weather being getting a bit rainy at this time. So this causes issues with the Guard and their priming pans. So essentially they have to do this attack through this through Ligny without firing a shot. And the Guard are supported by cavalry as well. So the Prussian centre begins to fold quite quickly. Blucher, who's been over here trying to rally the troops at La Haye, tries to lead, comes back. Essentially, I think now the weather's turned to a little sunshine, and it believed that somewhere around here he leads a charge, 2 brigades of cavalry against the Guard coming through Ligny, essentially trying to breach stem the breach that's going on. The guard are forming square, and they beat off the Prussian cavalry, and essentially the cuirassiers countercharge the Prussian cavalry. At 8:30 then, the French Imperial Guard with the supporting cuirassiers of Milhaud have essentially broken through. And the Prussian reserves, exhausted, begin to fall back, and we're starting to get the gathering dark. Eventually, we believe this is the mill here at Bussy. This is where the guard edge up towards, and it's somewhere around here that Blucher gets his horse shot from him, and the horse will fall onto his leg, pinning him down. His aide-de-camp is a guy called Nostitz. He dismounts and essentially sort of covers him, essentially, whilst a squadron of French cuirassiers pass by without noticing him. He seems to have a bit of a bad moment here because his own cavalry, the Prussians, then cavalry try to counterattack the cuirassiers, and they actually ride over him. And so Blucher's semi-conscious, and he's lifted into his saddle by a subaltern and then led into the shelter of the now retreating rear guard, who are probably streaming back this way. So essentially, at this point, the control of the Prussian army is now under Gneissau's control, and what has essentially going to save the Prussians at this point is the onset of nightfall coming. Essentially, the center has kind of been broken, but one of the factors that also means that the defeat isn't complete is that the wings of the Prussians army are so stubborn, and they would only fall back when they knew that Ligny had fallen, and when they did fall back, they only fell back to Sombref, and the rear guard essentially would hold Bry. So we're talking that they fall back essentially to this area here. And then, so because of then it was I suppose retreat, or the route becomes then more of a retreat rather than an actual a chaotic panic. And so you can see how important it was that de Erlon, for some reason, even in sight of the battlefield, if he had just carried up and come through this gap here, attacking the rear of this right flank and pressuring Bry, this retreat of the Prussians would have been probably more of a rout, and in a certain sense, an uncontrolled rout would mean that the troops would probably retire down their supply route, which would have been to the east. Essentially scattering. There we go. So let me just because they didn't scatter, that means that withdrawal was essentially becomes a retreat back to Wavre, rather than a complete panic back to Namur. We get to about 9 o'clock then. And we find that Napoleon retires back to Fleurus. We get reports here that that he's exhausted, possibly ill. We're not sure. But we do know that he refuses to see Grouchy later that night. So what's essentially happened is, although there has been a defeat, the Prussian rear guard has managed to hold their position. They hold their position around until, in some breath, to around about midnight. Some even holding on possibly till the morning. And what we find then is that the Prussians take the opportunity to fall back northwards, and they, rather than heading this way, they will turn essentially north, and they will probably head towards Jean-Bleu, where they will try to link up with the 4th Corps of Boulou. And because they're going probably forward back towards Jean-Bleu, and essentially then got the opportunity to head north to Wavre, they will remain in supporting distance of Wellington's army. And Wavre becomes that sort of rendezvous point, gathering point for the army to head to. Also, it gives a good, if you think about it, let's just pause there and I'll just show you on the map what we have essentially is the effects of this well, let's call it a victory for the French, but it's essentially almost like a score a score draw. Napoleon wanted the Prussians to fall back along this road here through Mazy down to Namur, because this is essentially their route back through Liège and back then into Germany. And what's happened is that they've actually, yes, they broke through at Ligny, but they were stubborn on their flanks, and they stubbornly sort of rearguard action meant that they could slowly come back to Gembloux. Then they essentially then make a decision at Gembloux where they have to they can go either way, and of course they make the decision to go north towards Wavre. That's is a good place to get to, because then they can be in touching distance of Wellington and heading back towards Brussels. It also means that if you've got an army that is essentially being defeated, if you give them a pretty long distance to march, you know, then it all seems to be part of a plan, and it helps with the morale to get the troops essentially back into some sort of order. So we're here now, we're at Gembloux, and this is where the Prussians will pull back to. They essentially say as well that the Wavre was chosen for the simple reason that on their maps and by candlelight, it was one of the most obvious places on the map, and presumably by that time, and you're tired, and you've been fighting all day, and you know, you need to get orders out quickly to your troops. You know, then just, you know, Wavre is the place to go. We're going to go there. Wellington later on in his dispatches, his letters would say that the candlelight decision in driving rain at night was the decisive moment of the century, keeping the Prussians in contact with their ally. Was basically the essential element in the winning of the eventual campaign. And Napoleon, speaking of Wellington, essentially he was on St. Helena, said he ought to light a candle to old Blücher. Without him, I don't know where his grace, as they call him, would be. But as for me, I certainly wouldn't be here. Okay, so I think we'll wrap that up. And just talk about the sort of the casualties, losses in the battle. So we believe it's estimated to be around about 12,000 casualties on both sides. Naylor estimates that the Prussians lost around about 16,000 maybe, and the French between 11 and 12. So even though one army is forced to quit the battlefield, essentially the casualties are not. There's not a great difference between the armies. And essentially, I think one of the reasons why those casualties weren't so high in comparison to the French was that there was no real energy in the pursuit of the Prussians. It was raining, it was late, you know, we've been fighting all day. I don't think there was any sort of eagerness. The Prussians did, however, did lose 10,000 soldiers from their ranks from desertion, mainly from the Rhineland and Westphalian provinces. They essentially would head off to Liège. They wouldn't follow up to Wavre. And yeah, so what we'll do is I'll bookmark that there, and we will continue this tomorrow. I'd like to thank you for listening and for everybody who's joined in today. STN Guyan 77, hi, good to see you. And guy at the back as always. Actually, I haven't checked to see if you're out. Ah, yeah, there you are. Oh, you've shaved. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. We'll carry on then. Tomorrow we'll be discussing the Battle of Quatre Bras and try and find out why it is that Wellington didn't manage to fulfill his promises on this day. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and follow. And I'll see you in the next one.